Coming up on this edition of Press Watch 2012, the joylessness and frustration shared by journalists in covering the 2012 election, how the campaigns are limiting what journalists are allowed to cover and share with media consumers, and media coverage of the First Lady, worthwhile, fair, or fluff filled with stereotypes. And later, Press Watch's Bravos and Blunders, who gets this week's props for a job well done, or not so much. Welcome to Press Watch 2012. I'm Zach Jacobs. Press Watch is a production of the Mass Communications Department at Oklahoma City University and is made possible by the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. We're looking at national news media coverage of the presidential campaign and the news in light of ethical guidelines within the professional journalism community. And to do that, we have our guests today. We have a communications major here at OCU, mass communications actually, and our multimedia editor for the school's newspaper, The Campus, as well as an intern for our local CBS affiliate, News 9, Rachel Morse. Hi there, Rachel.
Hi.
And we also have a double mass communications major and political science major here at OCU, Maddie Alexander. How do you handle all of that?
A lot of time balancing.
Sounds good. Well, today we're talking about, again, frustration and just the difficulties that news journalists are having today in covering this election. Now, it is the social media era. We have Twitter, we have Facebook, and something that can go, something that happens can go around the world in a matter of hours, if not minutes. But Mark Leibovich, an author from the New York Times, wrote a story, and in it he quoted something. He said, "The treadmill existence of having to file articles around the clock, tweet non-events as they happen, and listen to the same canned speeches and campaign conference calls day after day, waiting for something, anything to bust up the script so that you can pretend there's news here, this can be the definition of joylessness." Elections are a big deal, naturally, for journalists, but where does, what do you think happened, Maddie, to get the campaign or modern campaigning this way?
I think a lot of it has to do with people want their information immediately, and more of the focus is on fluff and the appearance of a campaign rather than the content and the policies themselves. And that has, you know, people don't really care about what exactly the candidates' positions are. They just want to hear them mess up, or they want to just know what's going on with the campaign rather than their actual policies.
Okay. And Rachel, in light of this, as a mass communications major, do you think that this has bettered journalism of politics or even politics at all?
Has it bettered politics or coverage? I don't see that. I think journalists are constant. I think it's partly our fault too, because I see journalists wanting to have that big scoop, wanting that big story, wanting their attention. And in doing that, covering just the legislation, covering just the policy isn't enough because they know they're not going to get the highest number of readership. And so to throw in something about a presidential gaffe or they said this and it could have been skewed the other way, that's going to draw attention because people are interested in those types of things. So I think it's, you know, a two-way street here. You know, it's the audience wanting those types of things, but I think it's also the journalists not kind of doing their due diligence.
Well, it's funny that you say that because Leibovich was quoted by a guy named Dylan Byers, who writes for the Politico about this very issue. And Dylan Byers writes, "Of course, Leibovich and other journalists could choose not to cover the gaffes and the attacks, but because the campaigns have cordoned off the candidates and failed to launch a substantive discussion, attacks and gaffes seem to be the only newsworthy items of the cycle, which only reinforces the campaign's desire to keep their candidate cordoned off." Vicious circle? What do you think, Maddie?
I agree that it's a vicious circle. You've seen the case of Mitt Romney with his 47% comment that it was at a private fundraiser, a private dinner, and this tape got leaked. And now that it's been exposed to the public, they've reversed their policy on taping events. And now all of their events you can record them. And I think that has a lot to do with trying to avoid those mistakes and getting everything out there immediately rather than digging up a tape from a couple years or a couple months ago and saying the candidate messed up here, and then having to deal with all the press regarding that.
Okay. And Rachel, again, I have to ask you, are journalists benefiting from this besides maybe getting the big scoop? Mother Jones is now one of the popular ones for getting this 47%. But, I mean, is there any true benefit to journalists or journalism from things like this?
I think maybe now, yes, there's a benefit. You're being well known. You're getting attention. In the great journalism entity, no, there's no true journalism in happening upon these types of mistakes, and unless it's something that's truly newsworthy and impactful, happening upon the Watergate scandal, that's journalism. Mm-hmm. Happening upon somebody implying something somewhat scandalous and running it in your newspaper the next day, that's not journalism. That's playing off of the audience's love of people messing up. And I see the vicious circle that Maddie's talking about. I get frustrated as a journalist hearing when people are trying to talk to other people and they're not willing to be human. The president has been known, I've heard this summer from different journalists, as being cut off and being kind of a canned speaker. He doesn't talk off the cuff. He doesn't talk to journalists. And in ways that's cutting us off from, helping them in their job and making them well known to the public.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up as well, because there's a reporter out of the Des Moines, Iowa area. She writes for the Register. Her name is Jennifer Jacobs, no relation to me. Yeah. But she's covering Iowa politics, and she did a couple of tweets from a couple of days ago whenever Joe Biden was there speaking at a rally. And these tweets are really interesting because it shows, you're talking about, Rachel, the cutting off of candidates from the journalists. One of her tweets said, "Reporters sectioned off in back corner at a Biden venue. Obama aides refusing to allow them to speak to the audience without escort from the campaign." And then a second tweet came and it said that the audience is free to move around to go to the bathroom without a campaign escort at the Biden event in Council Bluffs, but the press, just the press, need one. Still a puzzle. What's going on here? What do you think is going on here, Rachel?
I think that they're running scared. You just see that everywhere. Even everyday people, you go up, you try to get an interview, and they say, "Oh no, don't include my name." People are paranoid right now because of how prevalent technology is and how one conversation or one statement can hit the world in a matter of seconds.
But as far as Joe Biden, sitting vice president and a candidate, not being able, or the press not being able to talk to them, I mean, what's going on there that you see from a journalism standpoint?
I see them trying to make sure that he doesn't slip up, that they can't get anything that would, drop in points on the polls. That's exactly what it is.
And politics-wise, Maddie, what do you see in all of this?
I agree. On behalf of the candidates, it's the job of the campaign staff to try to prevent their candidates from saying things that would get them in trouble. Specifically, Joe Biden says, that healthcare is a BFD and that America is going to go back to being in chains, and people equated that with slavery. And he has a reputation for saying things that aren't quite censored. He doesn't really have that filter there. And I think it's the job of the campaign to try to protect him and keep their ratings up. I mean, it is an election year after all, and that's what their goal is.
Very true. But one other thing that's happening, and not to completely pile on Joe Biden, but all of these things that we've talked about, and this thing that I'm going to talk about here, which is a video piece from MSNBC. And there are reporters there, one from the Washington Journal, one from Politico, who are talking, and they're talking about the difficulties that they have, not only being able to report, but some of their material actually getting screened by the campaign before it's actually able to go out. We got a video clip here. Take a look.
I think part of the reason that there's frustration among a lot of our colleagues about this campaign is that really every campaign now, the leash is pulled tighter and tighter on the press corps, and the restrictions and the management only increases. when we as reporters go to off the records or off the schedule stops that Biden makes and compose a summary, we call them pull reports, for the rest of our colleagues.
Because we all can't get in there because of security reasons. It's an agreement we make.
It's a product of the press and for the press. Right.
It has nothing to do
whatsoever.
Yes.
The Biden aides are trying to edit what's in there while it's being drafted, and then after you send it to them, reviewing it and going through there looking for potential landmines.
Politics-wise, how does this benefit anybody?
I think it benefits the campaign. Again, campaign staff, they want to protect their candidate, and I think part of them trying to review that is to make sure that the facts are correct and that they don't get incorrect facts that could be misconstrued by the press, or that just happen to be errors, but that could be taken in a whole other direction by everyone else.
But journalism-wise, how does this benefit anybody?
Oh, this is just, making every journalist in the world just cringe under their skin. It's infuriating if a politician tells you, you can't print this, you can't put this to air before we review that. That's just the biggest annoyance ever. And I think that we understand, or at least I understand what the purpose is, but I just see it as unnecessary. That's
understandable, and good points from you both. For what it's worth, the Radio TV Digital News Association says in its code of ethics that journalists are to provide a full range of information to enable the public to make enlightened decisions, just for what it's worth. Coming up next on Press Watch, the First Lady is not an official office, but it's one with a lot of influence and a lot of power. But what does the press coverage of candidates' wives do for the campaigns? And is that coverage appropriate? Right after this break. Back to Press Watch 2012, where we're looking at the national news media and ethics and how it all works during this presidential election. Still with us are Rachel Morris, a mass communications major, and Maddie Alexander, double major, poli-sci and mass communications. Thank you for sticking around with us. First Lady, important office, not technically an office by our Constitution, but still a very important office. History has, I wouldn't say necessarily define the roles of First Lady, but First Ladies have helped to, make history, from Eleanor Roosevelt to Hillary Clinton, and it's customary nowadays for First Ladies to have projects for things that they want to work on that they feel that are important. But it seems like in the media, I don't know if they're given a fair shake necessarily in the coverage during a campaign that they're given. I've got a clip here from CNN talking about Ann Romney, and let's just take a look at it and discuss it afterwards.
To those who know her, Mrs. Romney's attitude is nothing new. It has always been Ann to the rescue. In the Romney household, she is often called the trusted advisor and the Mitt stabilizer. But first and foremost, she is the great protector of all things Romney.
That's just a segment of a 3-minute long piece that CNN did. Just from that soundbite, and not trying to take anything out of context or anything, but Maddie, what do you think about this? Is this the modern image of a politician's wife? Maybe not even First Lady or potential First Lady, but a politician's wife. Is this modern?
No, I don't think it should be the job of the First Lady to have to kind of control or calm down the president if he is to become the president. I think that it's a little bit inappropriate even for her to say that she has to stabilize him. And to the public, I mean, even I watched that clip and thought, does that mean that he's irrational? Does that mean that he gets hot-headed at points? What exactly does that mean? And I think that gives him a bad reputation almost.
Journalism-wise, Rachel, what do you see in this kind of a piece talking about Ann Romney in this light, good or bad?
I see it as trying to understand who the president is, because for so long, journalists couldn't really pin him down, find out who he was. And since Ann was very accessible and these qualities were open and people were discussing them, I see this as a way for them to define who the president is, like Maddie was saying. If she's the protector, well, what does that make Mitt? if she's this way, if she's the protector of the Romney name, well, what does this mean about him as a president? So from a journalistic standpoint, I see this as not really talking about the First Lady, but trying to get a feel for who the president is.
Well, in that light, there's a photo that got released by the New York Times, and it shows Ann Romney on a plane, and she's talking with some reporters, but she's also doing something that may be stereotypical or considered a little old-fashioned. If we could get the photo up here on the screen. I don't know what you see in this image. What she's actually doing is, these are Welsh cakes, according to the New York Times, the journalist. She's handing out Welsh cakes to reporters that are flying along with Mitt Romney. Political-wise, Maddie, who do you think possibly told her to do this, and why?
You know, part of me thinks that it's just her being nice, but another part of me says that it's her trying to suck up to the press. This picture invokes a lot of feelings because it makes her seem like a flight attendant, and it makes her seem like she's just there to pass out snacks and not do anything substantial. And I think that kind of perpetuates the role of the women in politics as hostesses rather than actually being able to participate in politics.
Well, you say flight attendant, it certainly does, for good or for ill, it does look like she's dressed the part, like she should work on an airline, actually. What do you think in a journalistic light, Rachel, about this photo, and whether this was maybe a fair photo, if it puts forward the wrong message, anything like that?
Well, first of all, I would have loved to have been on that plane to eat one of those as a journalist. They would have loved that. But in the photo, it's a photo op moment. That's why they're doing it. She wouldn't be passing out those cakes, I don't think, unless she wanted it to be a photo that other people saw. I mean, I'm sure they love the press deep down in their heart, but I don't think they would willingly go out and pass out, shrink-wrapped little cakes unless they wanted a picture that would run. So I think this is an image that the campaign is trying to show of Ann Romney, that she is this kind of gracious host in the Romney family. And if you give them a photo op, journalists are going to take that picture, and that is the image that the American people are going to see.
And in the past, it's been, fairly or not, it's been kind of an assumed role for the First Lady to be the hostess of the White House, and it looks like here she's passing out hostess cakes on an airline. But speaking of baked goods, this is something, we've got a still from a story that ABC ran. One of the predictors, if you will, in years past for elections has been who has won a cookie baking contest, or who has the best recipe. Now, if you take a look at the headline, you see here, Michelle Obama beats Ann Romney in a vital cookie contest. Rachel, what do you think about the headline? What does this say to you? Can you read anything between it?
To me, I think that is just ridiculous. Vital cookie contest. There are other, fake predictors that have been rather accurate throughout the years of the presidential election. And putting that in that light, maybe saying it in a different way that's more tongue-in-cheek, I understand that. But this is making it look like, well, game's up, people. She won the cookie contest, so we might as well go ahead and put Barack back in his place. It's just, no, this isn't a vital part of the election.
And Maddie, political-wise, real quick, with Michelle Obama's campaign to fight childhood obesity, is this necessarily the best photo of her eating a cookie? I mean,
I don't think so at all. I think it's offensive to women. I think it's offensive to her campaign as far as trying to fight childhood obesity. It perpetuates the role of women as the hostess and not being able to be involved in politics themselves or have a cause. And it looks bad. I mean, it's not something that I don't think the campaign itself would have ever thought that Michelle Obama would participate in something like this. And it's offensive to women.
Well, regardless, for good or for ill, again, it ran. And talking about that in this light, the Society of Professional Journalists talks about in its ethics code, being able to provide a full range of information to enable the public to make enlightened decisions. And this might not have been the most full range of information necessarily. But coming up next on Press Watch is our recurring segment, Bravos and Blunders. Who gets our marks for good journalism and who we think should have thought things through. So stick around with us. And welcome back to Press Watch 2012. It's now time for our Bravos and Blunders segment. These are examples of the best and worst we've seen in journalism recently, and we're going to bounce these examples off our UCO students who are here on our panel, Rachel Morse and Maddie Alexander. Thank you for staying with us. First example is actually, we're going to do these in reverse order because we normally run with our Bravo, but today we're going to start off with our blunder. Now, the first piece that you're going to see is not necessarily a blunder, but it's a satirical piece. And it's from a guy named Craig Robinson, actually, who is the former political director of the Republican Party of Iowa. Now, he was quoted in Politico saying, "I hate to say this, but if Ryan wants to run for national office again, he'll probably have to wash the stench of Romney off of him." He told the New York Times this 2 Sundays ago, actually. Now, Paul Ryan was talking about washing the stench of Romney off him if he wants to run for public office again, as it says there, but again, this is going to be our blunder first because according to the editor's note of this story, at the very bottom of the story, this entire story was satire. However, this fact was lost on a lot of news outlets and newsmakers, including Comedy Central, Lawrence O'Donnell, host on MSNBC, the political blog The Daily Cause, Gawker.com, and a Nobel Prize-winning economist and New York Times writer and blogger Paul Krugman. The blunder is that Krugman said on his blog originally, "Can I say that even though I'm not exactly a fan of Mitt Romney's, this is just bad behavior? You're supposed to wait until it's actually over before you do this kind of thing." What are your thoughts on that, Rachel?
Well, it is a political column, and if people know anything about Politico, they're very well known for their opinionists and having their own opinions. And so I wouldn't write that, but I think the title should have been clear enough that other news outlets shouldn't have run with it. And yes, we are allowed to comment on each other and to make observations about someone else's piece. So I neither disagree with his right to write that type of satirical piece. Do I think it was good or well done? I'll save that for later.
Again, in the end of the story, it was listed as a satire. It seems to me, for whatever reason, Krugman forgot to read it all the way down there to the end. Do you think this reflects poorly on him in a political light because he carries some weight in the Democratic circle?
I don't necessarily think it reflects poorly on him. I think that it's just an error. And a lot of people have fallen victim to the world of satire. Between The Onion and the Daily Current, there have been a lot of satirical stories that have gotten people in trouble because they believed that they were true. And part of that has to do with people, the general public, having trouble differentiating between a satirical article and a real article. I know there was a big controversy over an article about Todd Akin and his stance on birth control that was satirical, but so many people believed it because they thought that it was something that he would say, and I think that's gotten a lot of people in trouble, both politicians and the general public and commentators.
I think it's a kind of a fine line to cross, maybe unless you're able to read through the lines or read the entire story to pick up on things like that, whether something is satire or not. On Krugman's blog, we should have a screenshot of it here. He shows on it that he fell for it, saying that he wasn't actually a fan of Mitt Romney's down here at the bottom. But at least up at the top, this is where our Bravo comes in. He didn't delete everything out of his blog. He did a strike through on the stuff that he originally put that he thought was off. But he said that this was really clumsy satire, maybe to cover himself. Excuse me, I don't know necessarily, But if there's any bravo that we give him, it's that he didn't completely delete it as if it never existed before. He actually kept it on. Final thoughts on that or anything else that we've had? Rachel?
I say well done. It's very rare that you see someone who's willing to be that transparent with work that they're not proud of or they realize is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you hear that if something's wrong in the newspaper, it gets to the very back in very fine print, or something in a newscast. I can't remember the last time I heard something that was, wrong that they said on air. So I say, really well done.
Maddie, final thoughts?
I agree. I think it was a good move for him to strike it through, not erase it, because that shows that he's willing to admit his mistake, and that also gives him room to criticize Politico for putting out this article and saying, well, I'm a prize-winning economist, New York Times writer, and I fell for this. I think that gives him a lot of credibility to say there's something wrong with the world of satire. It's colliding with politics.
Okay. Well, ladies, thank you both very, very much for your input. I really appreciate it today. That's all the time we have for Press Watch 2012 today. And my thanks again to OCU students Rachel Morse and Maddie Alexander for their insight and their commentary. Press Watch is a production of Oklahoma City University in partnership with the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. And we'll do this again next week. We'll see you then.